The men who smelled it said it smelled like fresh-cut hay, like a summer field after rain, like something alive and growing. Some of them breathed it in and smiled. It was the best thing they had smelled in months. Then they went back to their rations, wrote their letters home, stood their watch, and slept in their bunks. They felt fine. Every single one of them felt completely fine. 48 hours later, they began to drown. On dry land, in their bunks, in front of their friends. The gas they had inhaled 2 days earlier, the pleasant-smelling, nearly invisible gas, had been working inside them the entire time, slowly converting the moisture in their lungs into hydrochloric acid, quietly destroying the cellular tissue that kept them breathing, building toward a collapse so total and so sudden that it looked to everyone who witnessed it like men dying of nothing. The gas had a name: phosgene. The Germans marked their artillery shells with a green cross. Soldiers called it Green Cross gas. It was responsible for approximately 80% of all chemical warfare deaths in the First World War. And its most terrifying quality was not what it did. It was what it waited to do. What came before? To understand why phosgene was so uniquely horrifying, you have to understand what gas warfare looked like before it arrived. The first large-scale chemical attack in the war was chlorine gas, released by the German army at Ypres in April 1915. Chlorine was devastating. It killed hundreds and caused panic across a wide section of the Allied line. But it was also visible. A thick, heavy cloud of yellow-green gas rolling across no man's land, hugging the ground, visibly consuming the landscape as it moved. You could see it coming. And it smelled unmistakably wrong. A sharp, bleach-like odor that announced itself immediately, that screamed danger to every instinct a human being possesses. Soldiers who saw and smelled chlorine coming had seconds to respond. Seconds was often enough. The gas mask, even improvised early versions soaked in water or urine, provided meaningful protection against chlorine. The Allies adapted. They issued better masks. They trained soldiers. And the death toll from chlorine, while terrible, was manageable in the grim arithmetic of the Western Front. The Germans understood this. So they found something worse. The Green Cross. Phosgene was first deployed in significant quantities in December 1915 near Ypres, the same ground where chlorine had been used months earlier. The German High Command knew what they had. Unlike chlorine, phosgene was nearly invisible. At most, a faint, barely perceptible white mist that dispersed quickly in the open air. In the chaos and smoke and fog of the Western Front, it was effectively undetectable. Unlike chlorine, it did not burn the nose and throat on contact. It produced only a mild, brief irritation, easily dismissed as dust, cold air, the ordinary discomfort of trench life. And unlike chlorine, it smelled not of bleach and industrial death, but of hay, of meadows, of England in summer. The soldiers who inhaled it were not alarmed. They were, briefly, almost comforted. A British officer who survived an early phosgene attack wrote in his report, "The men did not know they had been gassed. The smell was not unpleasant. Several of them remarked on it positively. None of them put on their masks. There was no obvious cloud, no burning sensation. There was nothing to indicate that anything was wrong. There was nothing to indicate that anything was wrong." The 48 hours. This is what phosgene was doing while the soldiers felt fine. Phosgene, chemical formula COCl2, is highly reactive with water. When inhaled, it travels deep into the lungs, past the upper respiratory tract, where early warning symptoms would normally register, past past the areas that chlorine damaged and that soldiers had learned to recognize as danger, into the alveoli, the tiny air sacs at the deepest level of the lungs, the structures responsible for the exchange of oxygen into the blood. There, in the warm and humid interior of the lung, phosgene reacts with water molecules in the tissue. The reaction produces hydrochloric acid. The acid destroys the alveolar membrane, the thin wall that separates air from blood. When that membrane is destroyed, fluid from the bloodstream leaks into the air sacs. Slowly, steadily, invisibly, while the soldier eats his rations, while he writes his letter home, while he sleeps. The medical term for what was accumulating in their lungs is pulmonary edema. The simpler term is drowning from the inside. The soldiers' own bodies, responding to the acid damage with the only tools they had, sending fluid to the site of injury, were filling the lungs from within. The body's healing response was the mechanism of death. And for up to 48 hours, none of the men knew.
The collapse. The medical officers who witnessed phosgene casualties described the onset as sudden and total. A man who had been sitting at a table writing a letter would put down his pen, stand up, and within minutes be unable to breathe. His face would turn blue, cyanosis, the visible sign of oxygen deprivation. His lips would foam. He would cough up fluid, first clear, then pink, as the blood mixed in. And there was nothing to be done. There was no antidote for phosgene poisoning in 1916. There is still no specific antidote today. The only intervention available was rest, absolute bed rest, which slowed the heart rate and reduced the oxygen demand on the destroyed lungs. If a man exerted himself, even mildly after phosgene exposure, the death rate increased dramatically. Some men were killed simply by the walk to the aid station. The exertion of getting help was enough to kill them. A British medical officer at Ypres described watching an entire ward of men, all of whom had appeared healthy enough to be ambulatory 48 hours earlier, die in a single morning. He wrote that the ward had been full of men who were laughing and talking and playing cards the previous afternoon. He wrote that by 10 o'clock the next morning, the ward was quiet, in the way that only wards full of dead men are quiet.
The trap. What made phosgene uniquely useful as a weapon, and uniquely monstrous, was that it weaponized the soldier's own sense of safety. The chlorine survivor knew he had been attacked. He knew to report it. He knew to be watched. The phosgene survivor did not know he was a victim. He knew only that the air had smelled briefly pleasant, and that he felt fine. He returned to duty. He helped carry supplies. He went on patrol. Every exertion accelerated the chemical process destroying his lungs. Every normal soldierly activity was invisibly killing him faster. The gas had no front edge, no visible arrival, no announced attack. It had only a back edge. The moment 48 hours later, when men who had been fine suddenly were not. Phosgene killed more men than any other chemical agent in the war. It killed them by convincing them they had survived it. The most dangerous thing it did was make them feel safe. The moment they felt safe was the moment the clock started running.
The scale. Phosgene, alone or mixed with chlorine in what the Germans called white star gas, was used extensively by both sides from 1915 to 1918. The Germans fired it in green cross shells. The British produced and deployed it in their own munitions. Both sides understood exactly what it did. Over the course of the war, chemical weapons killed an estimated 90,000 soldiers and injured over 1 million more. Phosgene accounts for approximately 80 to 85% of those deaths. That number, 80% of all chemical warfare deaths from a single agent, represents something specific about what phosgene was. It was not the most dramatic weapon of the war. It produced no visible cloud to photograph. no distinctive color to name, no instantly recognizable attack that soldiers could describe in their letters home. It killed quietly, from the inside, after a comfortable delay. It killed people who thought they had survived.
What remained? The use of chemical weapons in the First World War led directly to the Geneva Protocol of 1925, the first major international agreement prohibiting the use of biological and chemical weapons in warfare. The protocol was a response to what Phosgene and the other agents had done. It was also, in the most honest reading of what followed, largely ignored. Chemical weapons were used in conflicts throughout the 20th century and into the 21st. The chemistry of phosgene itself has never disappeared. It remains a significant industrial chemical used in the production of plastics, pharmaceuticals, and agricultural chemicals. Hundreds of thousands of tons of it are produced every year. It sits in industrial facilities across the world, contained, regulated, carefully managed. The mechanism is the same as it was in 1915. Phosgene still smells like fresh-cut hay. It still reacts with water in the lung to produce hydrochloric acid. It still produces no immediate warning. The 48-hour delay is still 48 hours. The soldiers on the Western Front who breathed it in and smiled, who said it smelled like England, like summer, like something worth living for, they are the reason we know what it does. They felt fine when they breathed it. They felt fine for 2 days after. And then they drowned. In their bunks. On dry land. In front of the men who had breathed the same air, and for reasons of chance and wind direction and the precise depth of a breath, survived. The gas left no mark, no visible wound, no indication in the body of a man found dead in his bunk that anything had come from outside. The killing was entirely internal. The trap was set in the air. It closed in the lungs. And the only warning it ever gave was the smell of a summer field.